The door creaks open and she steps inside. Maya, a dedicated and highly qualified employee, has been called to her boss's office. Her heart pounds. Not out of fear of wrongdoing, but because she knows exactly what this meeting is about. The tension in the air is almost suffocating. She's worked harder than most, staying late, taking on extra assignments, and always going above and beyond. Yet today, none of that matters. The man across the desk, Mr. Bradley, is visibly frustrated. His tone is sharp, his words cutting, and beneath them lies an unmistakable layer of bias. Maya listens, her face calm, but her mind racing. She knows the real reason for his anger. It has nothing to do with her work ethic or skills. No, the problem lies deeper, rooted in something far uglier: her race. For months, she endured the subtle digs, the overlooked contributions, the invisible barriers. But today, she's had enough. Yet, as she stands there, listening to Mr. Bradley's biased rant, she doesn't argue. She doesn't plead. She doesn't need to. What Mr. Bradley doesn't realize is that this meeting isn't the end of Maya's story. In fact, it's only the beginning. Imagine working your hardest, only to face this, simply because of the color of your skin. What happened next is a lesson this boss would never forget. What if the person you underestimated turned out to be the one in control? Maya had always been a high achiever. From earning top honors in school to graduating at the top of her class, she had proven herself time and time again. When she landed a position at one of the most prestigious firms in the city, she thought it was her big break, a chance to show what she was truly capable of. She was hired as a marketing strategist, a role that required creativity, precision, and leadership. Maya had all of these in spades. But the moment she stepped into the office, she realized she was walking into a space where her qualifications weren't enough to shield her from judgment. Her boss, Mr. Bradley, was a man of authority, middle-aged and confident, with decades of experience in the industry. But beneath his polished exterior lay a deeply ingrained bias. While he didn't openly express his prejudice, his actions spoke volumes. To him, Maya was an outsider, someone who didn't fit into his vision of who belonged in a top-tier firm like his. It started subtly at first, small slights that Maya dismissed as coincidence. She wasn't included in key meetings with high-profile clients, even when her work directly contributed to the projects being discussed. When she asked about it, the response was always the same: "It's a high-level discussion. You wouldn't need to be there." But then she would hear her colleagues casually talk about the meetings she missed, meetings where her ideas were presented without her being there to defend or expand upon them. The scrutiny on her work was unrelenting. Reports that she spent hours perfecting were picked apart unnecessarily, while her colleagues, particularly those favored by Mr. Bradley, seemed to breeze by with minimal effort. No matter how hard she worked, it was never enough. And yet, she continued to push forward, determined to prove herself. The office culture didn't make things any easier. Maya often overheard her co-workers' whispered conversations that revealed just how deep the bias ran. "I don't know how she got hired," one colleague murmured. "They must have needed to meet some kind of quota." Others speculated on whether Maya could handle the demands of the role, never considering that she was already outperforming many of them. But the tipping point came during a team meeting. Maya had spent weeks developing a new marketing strategy, a bold, innovative approach that had the potential to bring in significant revenue for the firm. She presented her idea with confidence, detailing every aspect of the plan and answering questions with ease. Yet, when she finished, Mr. Bradley simply nodded and moved on to the next agenda item without a single word of acknowledgement. Maya sat there, stunned, as the room fell silent. Moments later, another colleague, someone Mr. Bradley openly favored, spoke up. He repeated Maya's idea almost word for word, adding only a minor adjustment. This time, Mr. Bradley's reaction was entirely different. He smiled, clapped his hands, and exclaimed, "Now that's the kind of thinking we need around here." The room erupted in applause. Maya's chest tightened as she sat frozen in her chair. Her idea had been stolen, her efforts erased, and her contributions rendered invisible. This wasn't the first time she had felt this way, but something inside her shifted at that moment. She decided then and there that she wouldn't let this go unnoticed. From that day forward, Maya began documenting everything. She kept a record of every slight, every exclusion, every instance of unfair treatment. Emails were saved, meetings were summarized, and every exchange that revealed bias was carefully noted. She knew that if she ever confronted Mr. Bradley, she would need more than just her word against his. This wasn't just about one stolen idea or one moment of disrespect. It was about a pattern of behavior that made it clear Maya wasn't seen as an equal, not by her boss and not by many of her colleagues. But what none of them knew was that Maya was no ordinary employee. She had a secret, one that would change everything they thought they knew about her. And soon they would learn the hard way that underestimating Maya was the biggest mistake they could make. As the days turned into weeks, Maya's situation at the firm became unbearable. Her role as a marketing strategist, once filled with promise, began to feel like a trap. Mr. Bradley's disdain for her was no longer subtle. It was blatant, unapologetic, and public. Began assigning her tasks that were far beneath her skill level, menial jobs that had little to do with marketing. One morning, she found herself organizing storage closets and alphabetizing files while her colleagues brainstormed in the conference room. She was handed tasks meant for interns, all while the projects she had initiated were handed off to others. To Mr. Bradley, Maya's contributions didn't matter. To him, she didn't belong. But it wasn't just the tasks. It was the constant belittling in front of her peers. In team meetings, he made a point of interrupting her, dismissing her ideas with a casual wave of his hand. "Let's stick to realistic suggestions," he would say, while others chuckled uncomfortably. Maya could see the pity in her colleagues' eyes, but no one dared to speak up. Then came the day of the private confrontation. Maya had requested a one-on-one meeting to discuss her workload, hoping to address the unfair treatment diplomatically. She sat in Mr. Bradley's office, laying out her case with calm professionalism, but Bradley's response was anything but professional. He leaned back in his chair, crossed his arms, and smirked. "You're really something, Maya," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "People like you should know their place. You're here because of diversity quotas, not because you're qualified. Don't forget that." Those words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Maya's hands tightened into fists under the desk, but she refused to let him see her anger. Instead, she looked him in the eye and simply said, "Noted, Mr. Bradley." Then she stood and walked out of his office. Those words, dripping with bias, would come back to haunt him. From that moment, Maya knew that her fight was no longer just about her career. It was about exposing a toxic culture and holding Mr. Bradley accountable. She became meticulous, documenting every slight, every insult, and every incident of discrimination. Emails were saved in a separate folder. Conversations, where legally allowed, were discreetly recorded. She logged details in a private journal, creating a timeline that painted a damning picture of the workplace environment. But Maya wasn't alone in her fight. Quietly, she began building alliances. There were colleagues who had witnessed Bradley's behavior. Some had even experienced it themselves. They were tired of his favoritism, his arrogance, and his blatant disregard for fairness. These colleagues began sharing their own stories, and soon Maya had a network of support. Together, they became a silent force, ready to speak out when the time came. Still, Maya knew she had to tread carefully. She kept her documentation private, her allies sworn to secrecy. To the rest of the office, she appeared as calm and composed as ever, continuing her work without complaint. But inside, she was preparing for the inevitable showdown. And that showdown came sooner than she expected. One Friday afternoon, Maya was called into Mr. Bradley's office without warning. The atmosphere was heavy, the tension palpable. As she stepped inside, Bradley was seated at his desk, a stack of papers in front of him. His expression was stern, almost gleeful, as he gestured for her to sit down. "Maya," he began, "I've given you more chances than you deserve, but it's clear you're not cut out for this role." He slid a piece of paper across the desk. A termination letter. Maya stared at it, her expression unreadable. Bradley continued, listing vague accusations of insubordination and poor performance, none of which were true. "You'll never succeed in this industry," he scoffed, leaning back in his chair with a sigh. "People like you rarely do." The words were meant to sting, to humiliate, but Maya refused to give him that satisfaction. She calmly folded the letter, tucked it into her bag, and stood up. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Bradley," she said, her voice steady. Then she walked out of his office, leaving him to bask in his hollow victory. What he didn't know was that Maya had no intention of disappearing quietly, and what she hadn't revealed, her true identity, would turn his world upside down. The story was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The weeks after Maya's departure were a blur for the employees at the firm. Whispers circulated about what had happened, but most assumed she had quietly moved on. Mr. Bradley, however, carried on as though nothing had happened, his demeanor as smug as ever. But then came the announcement. A mandatory all-hands meeting. Attendance was non-negotiable. Emails were sent out, cryptic in their wording but carrying an air of importance. Employees speculated nervously, but none were prepared for what was about to unfold. The meeting was held in the company's largest conference room, a sleek, glass-walled space designed to impress clients. Rows of chairs filled quickly as employees filed in, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Mr. Bradley sat near the front, his posture confident, assuming the meeting was about a new business venture or operational update. The high-ranking executives took their places, but instead of addressing the room, they remained silent, their eyes fixed on the door. And then she walked in. Maya entered the room, dressed sharply in a tailored suit, her presence commanding immediate attention. The murmurs began almost instantly. Those who recognized her exchanged bewildered glances, while others whispered, trying to figure out who she was. Mr. Bradley's smug expression faltered, confusion etched across his face. A senior executive stepped forward, clearing his throat to silence the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "it is my honor to introduce the new owner of this company, Maya Williams." The room erupted into shocked gasps. Mr. Bradley froze, his face turning pale as the realization sank in. Maya took her place at the podium, her gaze sweeping across the crowd. She began to speak, her voice calm but resolute. "For those of you who don't know me, I've been a part of this company for the past several months, observing, learning, and experiencing its culture firsthand. What I've witnessed has been eye-opening, to say the least." The room fell silent, the tension palpable. Mr. Bradley shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his earlier confidence replaced by visible unease. Maya continued, recounting her time at the company. "When I joined, I wanted to understand the daily operations, the dynamics of the workplace, and the challenges our employees face. What I didn't expect was to become the target of blatant discrimination, led by someone who should have been setting an example." Her words hung in the air, heavy with implication. She paused, letting the weight of her statement sink in. Then she turned her gaze directly to Mr. Bradley. "That person is sitting in this room today." A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd as employees turned to look at Mr. Bradley, who sat frozen, his face flushed with embarrassment. Maya reached into her bag, pulling out a small device. "Over the course of my time here, I documented everything," she said, her tone steady but firm. "Emails, conversations, meetings, everything." She pressed play, and the room filled with the unmistakable sound of Mr. Bradley's voice. The recordings were damning: dismissive comments during meetings, instructions to assign Maya trivial tasks, and finally, the private confrontation in which he made his racially charged remark. Gasps and murmurs filled the room as the staff listened, their shock and outrage evident. But Maya wasn't finished. She projected a series of emails onto the screen, highlighting patterns of exclusion, unfair criticism, and favoritism. Each piece of evidence painted an undeniable picture of a toxic culture perpetuated by Mr. Bradley. By the time she finished, the room was silent, save for the faint rustle of papers as employees shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "This moment," Maya said, her voice faint and finished, uncomfortably in their seats. "This moment," Maya said, her voice firm, "isn't just about holding one person accountable. It's about setting a precedent. Discrimination and bias have no place in this company, or anywhere else for that matter. Moving forward, things will change." As Maya stepped away from the podium, the senior executives rose to address the room. Mr. Bradley was asked to leave immediately, his termination effective that day. He stood, visibly shaken, and made his way to the door under the judgmental gaze of his colleagues. The man who once held power over Maya now left as a disgraced figure, his arrogance shattered. For Maya, this moment wasn't just about revenge. It was about justice. It was about sending a message that those who misuse their authority and perpetuate bias would be held accountable. As the room erupted into applause, Maya stood tall, a symbol of resilience and change. Maya had proven that integrity and perseverance could triumph over prejudice. And for those who doubted her, one thing was now clear: never underestimate the strength of someone fighting for what's right. As Mr. Bradley exited the conference room, his shoulders slumped and his face pale, the silence in the room was deafening. Employees exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of shock, relief, and a newfound respect for Maya. The man who had wielded power so carelessly was now gone, stripped of his title and his authority. Maya stood at the front of the room, her calm composure unwavering. When the door closed behind Bradley, she took a deep breath and addressed the staff once more. "What happened here today is just the beginning," she said. "This company was built on a foundation of excellence and innovation, but somewhere along the way, Fairness and respect were lost. That ends now. The room erupted into applause. For many employees, this was a moment of vindication, a sign that the toxic culture they had endured for so long was finally being addressed. Maya raised her hand and the room quieted. Effective immediately, I'm initiating a comprehensive review of our company's policies and practices. This will include mandatory diversity and inclusion training, an overhaul of our hiring and promotion processes, and the creation of a safe, anonymous reporting system for any concerns. Paused, scanning the room, her gaze steady. No one should ever feel excluded, dismissed, or undervalued in their workplace. Together, we're going to build a culture where everyone, regardless of their race, gender, or background, has an equal opportunity to thrive. The applause this time was thunderous, echoing through the room. Employees stood from their seats, some cheering, others wiping away tears. Maya had not only exposed the wrongs within the company, but had also offered a vision of hope and change. Over the following weeks, Maya wasted no time in turning her promises into action. Consultants were brought in to lead workshops on unconscious bias and workplace cultural training. An external audit of the company's operations revealed gaps that needed addressing, and new policies were implemented to ensure transparency and accountability at every level. For employees, the changes were immediate and transformative. Team meetings became spaces of collaboration rather than competition. Promotions were based on merit, not favoritism. And perhaps most importantly, employees began to feel seen, heard, and valued. But for Maya, the journey wasn't just about changing the company. It was about personal growth and resilience. Sitting in her office one evening, overlooking the city skyline, she reflected on everything she had been through. She thought about her first days at the firm, the microaggressions she endured, and the moment she decided to fight back. She remembered the sting of Bradley's words, the long hours spent documenting evidence, and the determination that kept her going. And now here she was, not just surviving but thriving, leading the very company that once sought to diminish her. Maya's voice echoed in her thoughts, a message not just for herself, but for anyone who had ever faced discrimination. "This isn't just my story," she said, her words carrying weight and conviction. "It's a reminder that racism has no place in any workplace, anywhere. Standing up against injustice isn't easy, but it's necessary. Change begins when we refuse to stay silent." Months later, the company had transformed into a model of equity and inclusion. Employees who had once felt marginalized now flourished in an environment that valued their contributions. Maya's leadership wasn't just about policies. It was about creating a culture of respect and empathy, one decision at a time. And as for Mr. Bradley, his career in the industry was over. News of his behavior had spread, and no company was willing to take the risk of hiring someone with his reputation. His downfall was a stark reminder of the consequences of unchecked prejudice. For Maya, the victory wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about proving that resilience and integrity could overcome even the most deeply ingrained biases. And for the employees who had witnessed her journey, she became more than just a leader. She became an inspiration. Maya's story is a testament to the power of standing up for what's right, even when the odds seem insurmountable. It's a story of courage, perseverance, and the belief that change is always possible. And for anyone facing similar challenges, it's a reminder that you are not alone. Change starts with one voice, one act of defiance, and it can ripple out to transform the world around you. Thank you for watching. If this story inspired you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories that matter. Maya's story is more than just an account of justice served. It's a call to action. It's a reminder that no one should have to endure discrimination, whether at work, in their community, or anywhere else. And it's a testament to the power of courage, resilience, and standing up for what's right. But this isn't just Maya's fight, it's ours too. Racism and inequality persist in workplaces around the world. For change to happen, it takes all of us stepping up, speaking out, and taking action. Have you ever faced workplace discrimination? Maybe you've witnessed it happening to someone else. If so, we want to hear your story. Share your experiences in the comments below, because by sharing, we can start the conversations that lead to change. Remember, you are not alone. There are resources and communities out there to support you. If you're facing discrimination in your workplace, consider reaching out to organizations that can help. We've included links to resources in the description of this video, covering everything from reporting workplace harassment to understanding your legal rights. And if you're in a position of leadership, ask yourself, what can you do to make your workplace more inclusive? It starts with listening, learning, and taking accountability. Change begins at the top, but it thrives when everyone contributes. Take a stand against racism, not just with words, but with action. Whether it's educating yourself, calling out bias when you see it, or advocating for equitable policies, every step makes a difference. If Maya's journey inspired you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with your friends, colleagues, or anyone who needs a reminder that justice can prevail. And if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. By joining our community, you're helping us continue to shine a light on stories that matter. Together, we can create a world where fairness, respect, and equality are the norm, not the exception. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for being part of the solution. Stay strong, stay informed, and remember, change starts with all of us.